Hello and welcome to the Catch a Lift Coaches Corner. I'm KAL head coach Melissa Luke, and this week I'm honored to welcome retired U.S. Army veteran Jon Glover to today's show. Jon is a U.S. Army veteran, Florida public defender, and KAL veteran athlete. Welcome to this week's episode of the Coaches Corner. Jon, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today.
I appreciate the opportunity to come chat with you all. It's a humbling and honored experience. So thank you.
Well, the pleasure is ours. Let's jump right in, Jon. So you had a little bit of an interesting past before you even joined the military. I know that you were working as a police officer in LA about this time. Tell us a little bit about this time, being a cop in LA, and what pushed you then to enlist.
Yeah, so I was a police officer when I was very young. I started at 20, following in my dad's footsteps. And I did that for 7, 8 years or so. I was a patrol officer. I helped with training new officers. I worked in investigations, neighborhood policing. So I did a little bit of everything. It was a big city, so it was pretty high adventure. And then I went out on my own as a consultant after about 7 years of doing that, just as the recession took hold in 2008. And that's sort of when I would have liked to have gone back to law enforcement at that time. But unfortunately, no agency was hiring. Everybody was broke and going bankrupt.
Yeah.
And so they were laying off police officers. And that's what a friend of mine, a Navy veteran who re-enlisted into the Army as an EOD tech, suggested that I look at the Army as an option. And so at 31 years old, I headed off to basic training in the Army.
That's terrific. Jon, what kind of was that transition like, going from civilian world, but again, police work to coming into the Army then? You'd had quite a bit of life experience already at that point. What was that like?
It was interesting. I wouldn't call it bad. I did go to basic training at the end of May. So all of the split option 17-year-olds between their junior and senior year were at basic training with the old man. And so that was probably the most interesting portion of it in terms of the training itself. The academics, the physical aspects was very similar to the police academies in California. They're very paramilitaristic anyway. So I didn't really find that to be overly challenging. But being older, I had to be more cautious about injuries than, say, a 17-year-old
right.
would. And so I was constantly nursing my body as best I could with no sleep, like you get in basic training, to ensure I didn't get hurt. And then the other thing is, I had life responsibilities, a home and things to take care of there. And so that was difficult to manage those things while I was gone. But other than that, I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed the people. It was a neat experience. My first time living outside of California, though, I was in South Carolina, and it's the summer. It was hot.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Jon, tell us a little bit about where and when you deployed.
Yeah, so after I went to basic training, I went to Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning and then off to Fort Leonard Wood for my basic officer leader course. And then while there, I went to airborne school. I was fortunate to have the opportunity to go down and do that. As soon as I finished my basic officer course, I was headed to Fort Campbell to one of the battalions in the 101st Airborne Division. And I got a call from the unit asking me to divert from going to Ranger School because they needed a platoon leader downrange. I literally was in Fort Campbell for 2 weeks before I was on a plane to Afghanistan.
Wow. That was a quick turnaround. Yeah.
It was just long enough to do the in processing, do the medical stuff, and get shot with all the different things that they give you shot for, and then I was gone. I didn't even unpack my house. I could literally left it in boxes. And so, yeah, I deployed to the Nangarhar province of Afghanistan, which is on the northeast side of the country near the Pak border. It's where the main, that area is where the main supply line runs from Pakistan through into the country of Afghanistan. So everything shipped via boat goes
Okay.
through the Torkham Gate, is what it's called, on the border. And so, yeah, I went there for 10 months.
And you were a platoon leader at that time, correct, John?
That's correct. So I was with what was known as a Special Troops Battalion. It's where all the specialty units in the infantry division go, like the engineers and intelligence and police. And but we were actual because of it was during the surge, and we were what was called a battle space owner. So we actually had an area of land, each platoon, that we were responsible for patrolling and basically hunting bad guys, doing projects, and trying to train and instill order with the local government and host
Right.
nation security forces. So we were definitely busy, but then we also carried the second duty because we were the police. We were the quick reaction force for three bases within our area of operation. So we were very busy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. John, you would go on and you would get to a point where you'd be embedded with the Afghan army. Would you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so my second deployment, I was still in the same unit. It was 14 months after my first one. I went back for my second tour. During that deployment, we were what was called a security forces um, assistance team, an SFAT team, and it was made up of one officer and one non-commissioned officer from each of the key branches of the military. So you had police, engineers, fires, medical supply, and then my team leader was our battalion commander, who was a special forces operator. And we lived on a base with the Afghan army. So every day we would be with our Afghan counterparts, teaching, training, and then doing patrols with them and things like that in order to help them stand on their own 2 feet, if you
Okay.
will.
Yep.
And so that was my second deployment. And that was a very interesting deployment because we were faced with the threat of green on blue from insurgents infiltrating the Afghan army. But where I was located, we didn't have body armor that we wore when we were with our counterparts. Unlike when I was a police officer, I had my bulletproof vest. Um, we didn't go out to be with those Afghans in full battle rattle. We had our handgun, a cell phone, and our regular uniform as if we were
Really?
walking around a base here in the States.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was
Wow.
it was a high adventure for sure to ensure we were always on our toes. And we did this 2, 3 times a day, 6 days a week for the entire deployment.
John, what was the purpose of keeping you guys out of the body armor when you were with them like that?
Well, we were supposed to be partners. We were supposed
Okay.
to be a team. So we were supposed to treat them and they were supposed to treat us as if we were in essence, on the same team. They didn't want us to appear standoffish. They wanted
Okay.
us approachable. They wanted us non-aggressive in terms of
Right.
our stature. So that's why we had to dress down, I suppose, so that we could basically become part of their unit for the purposes of assisting and training them with carrying out their operations.
Wow. That's very interesting. John, would you talk to us a little bit about the back injury you suffered while in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so my very first deployment, it was one of my very first patrols. I'll never forget it. It was a night patrol looking for a mortar site. We would take mortar mortar attacks several times a week at the various bases, maybe not our base specifically, but the other ones we were responsible for. So we would go out, and it was my first time in a real patrol with real night vision, the single eye vision, and my clumsy self. I'm walking along the ridge line of a mountain, if you will, not nothing super crazy, but I slipped because I missed a step and I tumbled down it. I
Oof.
I don't recall exactly how far I tumbled, but I picked myself up, dusted myself off, went back on patrol. Well, about 2 months later, I was sleeping in a police station at one of the Afghan police stations. I was sleeping under my truck because of the threat of insider attacks. I got up, went to put my boots on, and I couldn't bend over. My back had completely locked up. And so that's when I knew I had a problem. Obviously, because we were short officers and we had a mission to accomplish, the medic kept me kept me going with ibuprofen and muscle relaxers so that I could get through the deployment. But that's where the injury occurred. And that was my first deployment. So I did the second one without having the opportunity to get the back fixed.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah, that is very, very tough. I can't imagine having to go on another full deployment like that and doing that. When I was in Iraq, I injured my back. It was about halfway through the tour, and a little bit similar. Like I was just young and too stupid, I think, to really realize how bad I was hurt. And so I know what that's like though to continue on with mission, and you're dealing with some, very good pain on that. Uh, let's kind of move on here, John, and let's talk a bit about that transition. So you had a career, in the Army. Talk to me about coming out of it and getting back into the civilian world and what that looked like for you.
It was really hard because, I come back from my deployment. I moved back to Missouri, where I ended up taking command of a basic training, a one station unit training company. So it was a military police. They did basic training and AIT together.
Okay.
And that's where my body just quit. Like I just couldn't keep it together. My feet were a wreck. My knees were shot. My back, I was getting shots in my back pretty much on the monthly to
Right.
kill nerves, but also I was on the opiates, muscle relaxers, Valium because it was bad. And so at the end of my command, I made the decision to transfer myself to the Warrior Transition Unit at Fort Leonard Wood, which then consolidated me to Fort Lewis in the Warrior Transition Battalion up there in Seattle. And while I was there, I had my back surgery. I had my lower back fused. It was a major operation. It was, I think my wife told me I was in there for 12 plus hours
Oh
of
wow.
surgery.
Wow.
And then when I came out, I was on convalescent leave for probably 3 months because it was just so hard to get back to doing anything. And I was on so many pain meds, I couldn't drive
Right.
anymore. Um, so finally, when I was starting to recover, the med board is a long process. It's 18 months. They said, well, you need to go to work or you need to go to school. And I was like, what am I going to do? I'm 35, 36 years old at that point, pushing 40, and all I've ever done is chase bad guys around.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know how to do anything else. So I guess I'll try the school thing. And I said, well, what kind of school do I go to? And they're like, well, since you already have your master's degree, you can either get a PhD or you can try law school. And I was like, hmm, law school, huh? I'm not smart enough to get a PhD. So so I studied for the LSAT, which I took, I should note, 3 weeks after my back surgery. I barely remember taking that test.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and I was accepted into Seattle University School of Law. They're a very veteran friendly school. A lot of vets go to law school at Seattle University. It's a Jesuit school. Um, and the Army, because of the way the Warrior Transition Battalion is shaped, they tie into the VA while you're still on active duty. So I was
Really?
going to law school using voc rehab benefits and was still on active duty at the time. And so that started my law school career. I didn't know what I was going to do in law school. I had
Yeah.
no clue where I was going to end up, but I was just hoping to pass at that point. Just get me through it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I did 18 months of law school in Seattle before deciding that it was too cold and I wanted some sun in my life. And I used my final move to move me down here to Florida, where I finished law school at Stetson University College of Law. Um, and yeah, so I from 2016 to 2019, I was a full-time student again.
Wow. Wow. Um, and I imagine, yeah, that move did sound pretty good to the warm weather in Florida, coming from where you were coming from then.
Yes, it was. We left December 15th of 2017 and drove as soon as my last final was done. The U-Haul was packed. The movers are gone. We were heading south.
Yeah, that's awesome. John, talk to us a little bit about how your law degree has allowed you to continue to give back to your veteran brothers and sisters.
So, when I went to law school, um, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but all I've ever done since I was 20 years old is be in this government service and
Yep.
to help people, right? As a police officer and then as an officer in the
Right.
military, it was leading soldiers and helping people. So I was fortunate that one of my professors, I'll never forget her. She's a lovely lady, Nina Hayden. I had a conversation with her and she asked me if I would be interested or if I was at all interested in being a public defender. And that may seem strange that an ex-cop for better part of 20 years
Right,
would
right.
go be a public defender, but I took that as an opportunity to take all of my knowledge, skills, and abilities and to help people that were dealing with criminal charges. And so I'll never forget the interview I had with Mr. Dillinger, who's now retired. He was the public defender, the elected official. He told me that, we don't build the planes, we just fly them. You can't get somebody out of trouble if they're going to get in trouble, but you
Right.
can make sure that their rights are protected along the way. And that's ultimately what I do. I'm an officer of the court and I protect the rights of the people that I defend. About 9 months ago, I was offered an opportunity to promote into my current position, which is what I'm still doing now. I am what's called the Baker Act attorney for the Public Defender's Office. And Baker Act is the Florida version of civil commitment holds for the mentally ill. So in Florida, if you're suffering from a mental illness, some um, birth defects and disabilities, along with dementia, things like that,
Yep.
and you find yourself in an inpatient psychiatric facility, I'm the attorney that will represent you. And currently, I'm the only Baker Act attorney in Pinellas County. We're the second largest public defender's office in the state, and I have 7 hospitals that I represent um, in my practice with the public defender's office, including, and I'm very proud to represent all the veterans that are facing civil commitments in our region. Bay Pines is the largest um, VA hospital, I believe, in the state of Florida, and so all their psychiatric patients fall under my purview. So I very much get to help veterans. I did in criminal court I do now in civil commitment hearings, and it's I just feel like I'm always giving back, which is it's very rewarding to be able to do that still.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can only imagine what that's like for you. John, would you tell us a little bit about the veterans that you do work with through civil commitments and kind of a little bit of the differences that you've seen in the demographics, like, the Vietnam era and kind of post 9/11 veterans and what you see?
Yeah, so I worked when I was in the misdemeanor criminal division. We had a lot of veterans that were facing um, drug addiction, alcohol abuse addiction, things like that. And now in civil commitments, I get a pretty diverse group of veterans that I have to interact with. But I think the most interesting part is that a majority of my clients are the Vietnam era veterans that are now getting up in age,
Right.
that maybe suffered from mental illness relating to their service, or even worse, they came back and were so traumatized that
Right.
they hurt themselves through substance abuse, whether it's drugs or alcohol, and now they're suffering from drug and alcohol induced mental illness, or because some of them are really up there, they're suffering from dementia and other neurocognitive disorders affiliated with just getting old. I
Yeah.
actually had a 90 some year old prisoner of war veteran,
Oh
World
my
War II era veteran that I represented
oh my gosh.
um,
Wow.
through the VA a few weeks back, actually.
Wow.
And he was alive and kicking and feisty as all, but he was dealing with the end of life sort of
Yeah.
neurocognitive disorders. And then sadly, a lot of those I find when they're in the VA system is because they're alone. They don't have family, they don't have close friends or ties to the community, and they're heavily reliant upon the VA services to give them some kind of quality of life. And so that's probably the saddest part, is just seeing them be alone. And um,
Oh, it's gotta be
yeah,
very hard.
yeah, it's tragic. I'll tell you, the staff at Bay Pines, they're wonderful people. They all care about their patients. Everybody I work around, uh, they're veterans too, so we all
Okay.
understand. It's
Right.
um, it's a process of life for some of those folks. But yeah, that's it. Now we do have some of the younger ones too. It's like it seems to be a gap, right? So you have the older ones,
Right.
and then we had a gap in war where there
Yep.
wasn't a lot of war.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then now I have younger ones in their 20s and 30s.
What are you seeing out of that group, John?
The same kind of thing. It's a lot of PTSD, sexual trauma. I run into that.
Yeah.
But I would say the biggest problem probably is related to substance abuse, self medicating, if you will,
Yeah.
drugs, alcohol, things like that. And then, of course, they struggle with their job. And so a lot of them are homeless, and stay in shelters or group homes. And so it's hard for the young ones too.
John, I think, and asking this question as much for myself as anybody else, but could you kind of, I think people have kind of preconceived notions about people that are going through a system like that, and that are facing, you know, being institutionalized for long periods of time, and regardless of what era they're from. Um, what do you think that the outside world should kind of know about these veterans or these people that you're helping that we're missing?
That when you're dealing with mental illness, it's not a disease. They're not contagious, right? If somebody has a heart attack and ends up in the hospital, we don't think twice about them being in the hospital. But if
Right,
somebody
right,
if somebody's brain gets sick, which a lot of times it's it's chemical or hereditary. If their brain gets sick, then they need to go to the hospital to take care of their brains. And it's not something that should be looked down upon by the general public by any stretch. These people are sick. Um, Majority of them stabilize very well once they get the correct medication and doses of medications, and can live very productive, normal lives without going back into the hospital. But unfortunately, what happens is, because there is a stigma about mental health, there is a stigma about taking medication
Right.
because you're quote unquote crazy,
Yep.
that when they get out, they stop taking their medicine. And that creates a hamster wheel effect
Yeah.
where they just go round and round. They're on their meds, they're stable, they're doing great. They stop taking their meds and they're not doing so great. And so for anybody that has encounters with somebody that's suffering from mental illness that's acutely sick, is to just know that it's no different than having pneumonia, having heart problems, having kidney problems. It's the brain is nothing more than another organ in our body that we have to take care of. And
Yeah.
sometimes it requires hospitalization
Right.
to
Yeah.
stabilize you so that you don't hurt yourself or hurt anyone else or
Right.
neglect yourself. And so I think that's important to remember, and especially for the veterans that are suffering from the Vietnam era, is they didn't have the help that we have now. They
Yeah.
went decades with
Oh, absolutely.
little mental health support. Not that the VA didn't offer it, that's not what I'm saying, but
Right.
the fact that the stigma associated, or the fact that PTSD was minimized,
Yeah.
and as a result, they turn to other substances to medicate themselves. I think it's important to know that if the reason why there's more Vietnam era and less Gulf War era that I'm dealing with is probably directly correlating to the openness in the military to seeking help.
Right.
The services that are offered are very extensive now for veterans that
Yeah.
need mental health support. And there's a lot more opportunity to take advantage of those services for our veterans than our Vietnam counterparts had.
Yeah. John, thank you for sharing with us about that. Um, I want to transition a little bit here, and I want to talk about your fitness journey and kind of your time with Catch a Lift. Um, when did you first learn about Cal, or how did you come to be a part of Cal?
So one of my colleagues in school, a friend of mine, Robert Kilmartin, a former special forces operator, was going to law school at the same place I was on the same program. And when you're a veteran in school and you're an older student, you tend to flock together
Yeah.
because I didn't really fit in with 22-year-old kids straight out of college.
Yep.
So I got to know Rob, and he was a very fit person. He was into fitness and dieting, and I was struggling. I had lost my drive. I had lost my motivation. I couldn't do any sports, so it's like I had no reason to train. And so um, Rob uh, confided in me that he similarly had struggled with his weight after getting out of the service. And he found Cal, and they provided him with a home gym and some other services, and he was able to drop a ridiculous amount of weight. I want to say it was probably around 50 pounds, I think,
Yeah.
is what he lost. And he suggested that I look into it, which I immediately did. And I was like, oh, this would be amazing if I could get be a part of this and get back on track. And so I filled out the application, um, went through the interview process, which was very exciting. But it was also a little humbling because it's like anything, I had to admit to myself and communicate to the coach that interviewed me that I had stumbled and that I needed help and that I couldn't do it by myself. and that I needed that support to get back to where I was to function at a high level
Right.
physically and emotionally and mentally, and that they're all interlocked. And
Oh, absolutely.
so yeah, that's how I came to apply and become part of the program. And I waited a very long time for the grant, but um, there was a lot that I was able to take advantage of while I was waiting that benefited me.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Well, two things. First off, I want to give a shout out for Rob Kilmartin's podcast. We do have an episode about 10 episodes back. You guys go check it out if you haven't seen it yet with Rob Kilmartin. It's absolutely fantastic. But John, so right, you spent right around 18 months on that Cal wait list, and that's definitely a dreaded word, that wait list, and something that Cal works its absolute hardest, to get down is short or eliminate completely. But so you're on that for 18 months. Talk a little bit about how you did take advantage of that time, even though you didn't have physical funding yet into a gym or home equipment. Talk to us about the resources you took advantage of and what that time was like for you.
Right. So the first thing that jumped out at me immediately was the motivational text messages that would come to my cell phone on the daily,
Yeah.
with quotes, or well, mainly quotes, but just inspirational things. And when you see those every day, um, and you read them, it resonates with you that there's people out there that care and support you. And then beyond that, the Facebook posts, seeing people in the group that have struggled like me or worse than me, that are getting after it in their own way with their own limitations and their own obstacles, and they're having success, can't that has a very motivating effect on somebody that's trying to find inspiration to do something that they used to do. And then the landing zone has great information on dieting, meal prep ideas, exercises, things to aid in your development of a plan. Not to mention, you can always reach out to the coaches, even though you aren't in the grant. So I just made the best of what I had. I figured I didn't have the grant before. I'll get it eventually, but let me take advantage of something that is right in front of me to help get me back on track. And when I say back on track, I mean I was close to 230 pounds and my waist had ballooned to 40 inches. And I should note, when I came back from my deployment, I weighed 183 pounds and had a 30-inch waist. So I'd lost my way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so terrific though, John. And I love hearing that, how you did take advantage of that 18-month time, for all that you could. Um, Talk to us about your fitness, because you've got some big stuff going on. You got big stuff going on in your life fitness wise, but maybe why don't we kind of start at the beginning of it? Because again, you were seriously injured with a back injury, you know, um, how did you kind of get going with that fitness into where you are now?
So I was very diligent in my recovery. I stuck very close to the physical therapy regimen that was provided to me. I mean, in addition to my back surgery, I've had both my knees operated on, and I ruptured both of my plantar fasciitis while I was in the service. So my I run nowhere anymore. Like, if
Yeah.
my house could be burning down and I'm going to walk out the front door. I
Yeah.
don't run anywhere. But I was I had to learn a new way to lift and a new way to exercise. And for
Right.
me, it was, there's no more heavyweights. It's what my current coach describes as time under tension, is what I is how I operate now. So learning a new way to work out was very instrumental in getting back on track. And then the dieting, I I I, I drank a lot of beer. I ate garbage food. I wasn't eating the right foods at the right times.
Yeah.
And so I started learning how to do some of those things from scratch, to where I don't hurt myself anymore. And I had quite a bit of success, after I started with Cal and got back on track. I had success, but I plateaued to where I wasn't making any more progress. And that's where, other veterans stepped up and they afforded me an opportunity to see a different way. And that's where I got into the classic physique and bodybuilding that you're referring to here is
Yeah.
I was visiting a friend in Oklahoma, and one of my friend's wife's friends, she was there. She's an Army veteran, and she struggled too, the same types of things. And she now has achieved her pro bodybuilding card in the division of bikini competition. So not the bulky bodybuilding,
Yeah.
but the more modeling style. And she does pro shows, and that was very motivating
Yeah.
to see that next thing. But here we are again, another veteran
Yeah.
that's overcoming great obstacles to do great
Right.
things. That's very motivating to see that. So she put me in touch with Burn Fitness down here in the St. Pete area. They're a private studio of personal training and coaching. Um, Jeff, my coach now, is a Air Force veteran. Lisa, his wife, was a spouse of a service member for over 15 years. And so they're veteran friendly. They both understand veterans.
Right.
They're my age, and they suffer from aches and pains and ailments and injuries just like me.
Right.
And so they both took me under their wing and provided me coaching services that has now got me on track for my first competition coming up.
That's so great. And you're competing in the classic physique decision, right, John?
That's correct. Yeah, I'll be competing in the men's classic physique. My first show is about 19 weeks out. So I'm 19 weeks left of prep. I've been in prep since August. So it's been a long process. Um, but I'll be competing in the Division C. It's a height and weight based division system in classic physique. I'll also be participating in the over 30 and over 40 categories. So all heights and weights, just based on age, in the
Yep.
same division, classic physique, as well as the novice division. So this will be my first run at it. I'm very excited and very nervous at the same time.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh my gosh, we're so excited to hear about that. Definitely watch you, as this prep continues to go on. Uh, John, will you touch on for us a bit about how you've seen already nutrition play such an important role in this prep for the show?
Yeah, I would say probably 97% of fitness is done in the kitchen, and it's science, right? I'm an athlete. I have a coach, just like any
Yep.
athlete has a coach. And so it's not only what you eat, but it's when you eat, how many times you eat, how much of what you eat when you eat worked around your sleep schedule, your work schedule, and your workout schedule. So in my particular training regimen, I eat anywhere from 4,000 calories a day to 2,200 calories a day, depending on what day of the week it is.
Yeah.
I'll eat anything from 250 grams of carbs a day to, on my load day, 600 grams of carbs. And, all these diets that are out there that say, don't eat this, don't eat that, it's not, that's not going to work in the long run. It's really about putting a program together that fits your individual body type, your individual um, fitness goals, your desires. So a program for me would be different than a program for you, would be different from any other veteran out
Yeah.
there. And that's really what's been interesting, is to see how, cutting carbs out at night Um, Having your carbs around your workout will improve your workout because you'll have the fuel to function. But then when it's time to cut and you're starving to death, even though you're getting plenty of food, your body
Yeah.
just craves the sugars and the carbs.
Oh, for
It
sure.
is learning how to enjoy cucumbers and bell peppers and things like that that you just pretend are Doritos
Yeah.
when you can't have them. So that's been very interesting. As soon as I started the prep, I dropped another 4 inches off my waist
Wow.
almost instantly. My body fat is very low now. I'm nowhere near stage ready, but it's very good. And the most important thing is that I haven't hurt myself. I haven't so much as
Oh, that's
pulled a
huge. That
muscle
is huge. Yeah.
since I started prep, and that's because I'm doing it correctly. Too many times I would hurt my back or I'd hurt my knees or I'd hurt my elbow or whatever because I just didn't understand the science. And so that's where Jeff and Lisa and Burn Fitness has really stepped up, along with the stuff that's on Cal too. There's a lot of great videos. Sometimes when I'm bored of doing the same exercises, I'll look and see what's on Cal and in terms of different ways of working different muscle groups so that I can keep it fresh, so it's
Yeah.
not a boring routine.
Oh, totally. Um, why don't you touch on us too, John, a bit, just kind of on the mental aspect of all this, because it's like prepping for a bodybuilding show like that. I mean, there's a ton that's going into it. You have to be extremely disciplined. Again, not only with that fitness, but that nutrition, such, a big part of it, and as you get closer to the show, that's obviously going to keep getting more rigorous. Talk to us a bit about the mental component and how you've seen that in the prep.
So it's a mindset that I'm, in the military, we don't want to fail. We want to be successful. We're mission focused, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had that same drive my whole life. I mean, I did sports from the time I was probably 6 years old through college and then of course training for police work and for the military and deployment so you stay safe and healthy. So I've always had a purpose for my training. This is really no different. I have a date. That date is coming. I need to get ready. So for me, it's like mission prep.
Yeah.
You just get your mind right and wrapped around it. But also knowing that I'm doing it correctly is super motivating, right? When you look in the mirror and you're like, wow, I'm not a fat
Yeah.
kid no more. I
Yeah.
don't hurt and I get to eat plenty of food. Suddenly you're not depressed, you're not
Yeah.
frustrated, you're excited, and then you get those positive endorphins in your brain, and it's a nice change. You find
Yeah.
you don't drink as much, you're sleeping good, your life is just positive, and then when you surround yourself by people that are like-minded, then you become a little network of folks that are chasing the same dream. And so that's been very beneficial for my mental health as well as my physical health.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. I bet. That's so terrific to hear. John, I've got one last question for you today. I want to ask you, what does it mean to you to be a Catch a Lift Fun veteran athlete?
I'm I'm honored and humbled, to be quite honest, to be part of such a wonderful organization that helps people. There are so many resources available to service members that they don't know is out there, and it's not for a lack of trying. I think it's it's just you have to stumble on things sometimes. And so for me to be able to participate and share my story today to represent Cal in the gym, in the show, be a Cal athlete as a disabled vet, is I just want to, or I should say, I hope that my story does for someone else what the previous stories like Rob's did
Yeah.
for me. And if we can keep this perpetual motion of motivation and positivity to the next round of veterans, then I think we're all successful in our post-service
Yeah.
careers of support. I mean, we always said in the military, we don't see black or white, we see green. Well, I think veterans are the same way. I don't see I see other vets that want to do good things, and I think Cal does a great job, and I'm super excited to be part of it. And I just hope I can keep representing and doing good things and help it perpetuate itself.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's wonderfully said, John. Um, and before we get down here to the rest of our thank yous, I just want to thank you again personally. Thank you for your service to our great country, and thank you so much for continuing to give back the way you do, and serve our brothers and sisters in the capacity that you do. It's just absolutely phenomenal, and we're blessed to have you a part of this program. That's it for this week's episode of Coach's Corner. We will return next Wednesday at 1 Eastern Time with another new episode. Thank you, John, for sharing your story and your light with all of us today. It was absolutely terrific. Thank you to ClearBridge for your continued support of all things Catch a Lift. Thank you to Lynn Coughlin, Henry Pomper, and Kaylee Nassiri for your work to make this podcast possible. And thank you to the entire CAL staff for all that you do to push us forward. We do want to invite, if there's any CAL veteran athletes listening, if you guys want to jump on and talk for a few minutes with John and I at Rally Point, please just leave your name in that chat box and we'll get you guys a link sent over right away. And until next week, keep it real and stay CAL strong.